This is a typically brave and selfless decision by the Prime Minister. Once again, Margaret Thatcher has put her country's and party's interests before personal considerations. This will allow the party to elect a new leader who will unite the party and build upon her immense successes.
That afternoon, Mrs. Thatcher made her last speech to the House of Commons. It was a bravura performance.
She turned round and she said to the audience, "I'm enjoying this, I'm enjoying this." And she was absolutely at her peak.
The field was now open for others to enter the race. Michael Heseltine was joined by Douglas Hurd and John Major in the battle for the leadership.
The Prime Minister announced a very sad decision this morning. I believe the overriding need now is for the Conservative Party to find a leader who can unite it in handling present problems and in winning the next general election.
Mrs. Thatcher backed Major.
Many years later, I was sitting next to Margaret Thatcher at a dinner for Ted Heath, and she'd made a nice speech about Ted and so on, and she said to me privately afterwards, "I learned an awful lot from Ted Heath, etc." And we went on to that a bit. And then she said the real problem for the party was over there, and she indicated John Major, who was sitting a few places behind. And I said, "But Margaret, you say that, but why then did you tell everyone to vote for him?" And she lowered her voice, forgetting entirely my role in this in 1990. She lowered her voice and said, "I'll say to you something that I wouldn't tell everybody. He was the best of a very poor bunch," she said.
John Major was elected to the leadership. Mrs. Thatcher left Downing Street for the last time on the 28th of November, 1990.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're leaving Downing Street for the last time after 11 and a half wonderful years, and we're very happy that we leave the United Kingdom in a very, very much better state than when we came here 11 and a half years ago.
But then the Iron Lady's composure almost broke. Watch her face as she reaches her car. She recovered quickly for one last wave. Friends say, though, that she is deeply shocked by the seeming injustice of it all. 3 election victories and a clear, though insufficient, majority in the first ballot, rewarded, as she sees it, with the sack.
On arriving at her home in Dulwich, Mrs. Thatcher bravely declared she'd be back at work the next day.
We could be in Parliament tomorrow. I went across to the House today to establish my office, to get everything running.
We've always worked, Mrs. Thatcher added. It's the only thing we know.
7 months after she left office, and in an interview with ITN's political editor Michael Brunson, Mrs. Thatcher would recall her last days as Prime Minister.
Well, could I just, first of all, ask you to recall what must have been a very difficult meeting of the Cabinet?
Yes, of course it was. Of course it was. You don't take a decision like that without it being difficult, without heartbreak. Heartbreak there may have been, but it was the right decision.
But you had to get through it. Bernard Ingham, in his memoirs, has said that it was a traumatic experience. Those are his words.
Yes, it was. And it would have been very strange if it hadn't been. But we got through it.
In fact, you broke down.
We got through the House.
You broke down during that Cabinet, didn't you?
Yes, but I carried on.
And then the House.
By that time, I was back fighting fit, as you saw.
Just before that, though, the image that people will perhaps remember, as you said, the Cabinet was extremely difficult. And then you had to come out into Downing Street, and you had to face the cameras. In effect, you had to face the world. You had to come and make what was perhaps the statement of your life. And then I see that, we notice now that it's affecting you now, and it must have been
yes,
the most difficult.
Yes, it's not affecting my voice now. It's not affecting my voice. You're thinking back to traumatic things. But I managed to get through them. I managed to get through the television. I managed to get through the Cabinet, again, because there was something else to do. I had to get on to people, and I must say this, but Douglas Hurd and John Major said, if you wish to go on, we will propose you and second you again. And that was marvellous. That was marvellous. And then one had to get through cabinet, and one or two people wanted to leave because they too, of course, wanted to make provision for their own candidature. Quite right, quite right. But by that time, I had other things to do, and so I got on with them.
I think she always simply saw it as betrayal. She used the phrase quite openly, many, many times, about she'd been betrayed, she'd been stabbed in the back, there were these people who she thought she could rely on, and when it came to it, they wouldn't stand by me. Of course, that was rewriting history, because what she was having to deal with was political reality. It wasn't a case of stabbing her in the back, it was a case of people coming in, notably, of course, Kenneth Clarke, who were prepared to be blunt with her and to say that, no, they would not be able to support her if she continued in the way that she did.
The Iron Lady was defeated. By all parliamentary standards, this had been a brutal way to oust a sitting Prime Minister. After 11 years and 6 months, Mrs. Thatcher was consigned to the back benches to sit among the very people who had brought about her downfall. The Thatcher years were finally over, and no one could quite believe it. In the next programme, Margaret Thatcher's legacy, from her impact on domestic policy to her role on the world stage, and her influence over the future of politics in Britain.